Long, long ago, it was said that in the heart of Monte del Villaggio, village mount, resided a force as powerful as it was dark, that of a magician, or rather a sorcerer, capable of doing things that are on the edge of reality. But one fine day, there was a gentleman from the area named Gualtiero, a lover of risk and adventure, who, leading some friends, brave and bold like him, managed to penetrate the mythical mansion of the Sorcerer of the Mount. Proceeding cautiously into the cave, the small group of young men reached a stupendous underground hall, where they were confronted by an enormous golden dragon with two splendid rubies in place of its eyes. Their gazes, intrigued rather than terrified, rested on an inscription that was proudly displayed on the wall of the hall, and which warned the unwary profaners not to touch the treasure guarded by the legendary monster, as performing this action would have led to terrible calamities. The bold friends, not at all afraid, avoided the dragon, and going into the following caves, they found them literally overflowing with gold, very rare jewels, and precious stones of inestimable value. Continuing their journey, they found themselves almost by magic in the innermost cave, a truly fairy tale cave, where they saw the sorcerer sitting next to a clear lake, with two splendid griffins crouching at his feet. The dark old man urged them to approach and fix their ecstatic gazes on the surface of the lake, where the future events of our planet began to be projected, as if in a shadow theatre performance. Among the innumerable images placed before their eyes, it was those of war that most struck them. Terrified, frightened, and confused, they stood helplessly, observing the faces of the dead in battle, and the great calamities that always and perpetually, as in a cycle, return to haunt our reality, our history, our world. Our adventurers, courageous as they were terrified by that tragic spectacle of total destruction, and instinctively fled the cave, and, once out in the open, descended rapidly, leaping from rock to rock with lightning speed. But suddenly, a frightening roar made them raise their gaze towards the summit, and they saw the evil sorcerer fleeing on a flaming chariot, escorted by the two mythological griffins, rising ever higher into the sky, and at the same time gigantic boulders rolled down from the mountain, blocking forever its dark opening. It is said that every now and then this evil sorcerer returns with his fiery chariot, descending to the mouth of the cave to work on his potions, which, boiling and crackling in the ampoules and alembics, make the ground and rocks of the mysterious mountain tremble and vibrate with fearful jolts. The mountain heats up to such high temperatures that the vegetation struggles to grow, and the water evaporates before flowing from its potential springs. The inhabitants of the nearby lands maintain their folklore and hand it down from generation to generation, making this location, Mount Musinè, one of the most enigmatic places in Italy. Welcome to the heart of the Italian Alps, in the picturesque scenery of Piedmont, where Mount Musinè stands majestically. This mysterious and fascinating mountain, shrouded in fog and full of age-old legends, has been the object of curiosity and fascination for generations of explorers and scholars. Delving into the stories of ancient rituals, supernatural presences, and unexplained phenomena that have enveloped the Musinè, we will discover a new world where reality and the supernatural meet. Mount Musinè has always attracted the attention of those who believe in the energy of ancient sacred places. Some argue that there is a portal to a parallel world here, where unknown dimensions meet and interact. Others tell of encounters with legendary creatures that inhabit these mountains, such as goblins or fairies. But legends aren't the only element that fuel the enigma of this mountain. Mount Musinè is also imbued with a 1,000-year history, which links it to ancient civilizations and mysterious cults. Archaeological remains testify to the existence of ancient temples and sanctuaries, leaving clues about the presence of a profound spirituality that has permeated these lands. Welcome to a unique experience where reality and legend merge, and where the veil of mysteries will be lifted, at least in part. Get ready to immerse yourself in the enigmatic world of Mount Musinè. Mount Musinè is the easternmost mountain of the long ridge which, starting from Roccia Melone, divides the Susa and Lanzo valleys. About 1,150 meters high, it represents one of the best examples of an outcrop of the Earth's mantle. It is a sliver of continental mantle that was lifted up and brought to light by rifting tectonic movements. The rocks it is made up of are mainly of the ultra-basic type, and are in a state very close to their original one, as they have not been transformed by the metamorphism which has instead affected various other areas of the Alpine chain. In summary, Mount Musinè would represent a fragment of the Earth's mantle, which reached the surface almost intact, thanks to the enormous tectonic thrusts that animate the crust of our restless planet. In this area with unique geological characteristics, man has shown his presence for over 4,000 years. For example, in the municipality of Casilette, there are traces of a hut from the end of the Bronze Age, while the Late Iron Age, or the last centuries before Year Zero, are documented by several finds, such as ancient ceramics, and above all by a probable ritual site dating back to the 3rd century BC. Subsequently, in Roman times, the inclusion of the area between Turin and the Susa Valley in the sphere of influence of Rome is well represented at the foot of the Musinè by the ruins of 2 residential villas. At least since the Middle Ages, the Musinè has represented for the communities settled at its feet an essential territory for the needs of the community. In fact, it was a precious reserve of timber, grazing land, a place for gathering wild fruits, grass and foliage, not as private property, but as common land, a source of survival. For centuries, the periodic cutting of wood, or coppicing, on the Musinè was an important source of income in the budget of the local municipalities, and for centuries, grazing and the collection of grass and leaves was a civic right that the community always tried to protect. Furthermore, the waters of the various springs were collected from the mountain and were channeled to feed the fountains of the villages that sprang up downstream. Musinè also offered mineral resources. The presence of magnesite was already evident in antiquity and was used as a material for floors in the Roman villas we previously mentioned. In the mid-19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, Turin experienced enormous economic and manufacturing development, transforming itself in a short time into a metropolis. Together with Genoa and Milan, it constituted the so-called Industrial Triangle, or that enormous territory which drove the economy of the newborn Kingdom of Italy. For this reason, the industrial use of magnesite began. It is therefore not surprising if a mountain so essential to the survival of the community has also seen spiritual locations arise on it, where people recognized themselves and expressed their faith and values. From the sanctuary of Santa Baco, built in the mid-16th century and a space for socio-religious aggregation, to the monumental cross built in 1901. For this reason, Mount Musinè is also considered a spiritual place, or a magic mountain, where positive and negative energies are channeled. Furthermore, a second consideration regarding Turin is obligatory. The city, located just 12 kilometers from the Musinè, was not only for a long time the major Italian industrial centre, as we have already mentioned, but it is also the European capital of magic, finding itself at the vertex of two esoteric triangles, which are opposed to each other, representing good and evil, the malefic and the beneficent. In fact, it should be noted that Turin is the only city that is part of both the Triangle of Black Magic, or the Triangle of the Devil, together with London and San Francisco, and the Triangle of White Magic, with Prague and Lyon. The fulcrum of black magic would be found in Piazza Statuto, located to the west, where the Porta Decumana of the Roman camps was located. This area symbolized the underworld, the entrance to the realm of the dead, and was also an area used for burials. The fulcrum of white magic would instead be at the Fontana dei Tritoni, not far from the point where the river Po, symbol of the sun, meets the river Dora, symbol of the moon. Furthermore, the 45th parallel that runs through the city would bring a large amount of positive energy. Returning to Mount Musinè, probably also due to its relative isolation compared to the other peaks and the particularity of its vegetation, the mountain has always been considered an esoteric site and a favourite meeting point for performing magical rites. In fact, there are several mysterious and legendary tales about Musinè which even in the last 60 years have veered towards the hypothesis of life on other planets. From the hypothetical site of an alien base and various UFO sightings to the presence of nocturnal will-o'-the-wisps. From streams where in some points the water would flow contrary to the force of gravity to a spiritual radiant catalyst point for the mysterious roots or orthogonal lines. And even a meeting place for the collection of magical herbs for the Maschere, or the witches of Piedmontese folklore, mythical and singular figures which need to be studied in greater detail. These witches, known as the Maschere, populated the slopes of the majestic Mount Musinè in the splendid Susa Valley in Piedmont. These enigmatic female figures have woven a web of mystery that still fascinates the collective imagination today. The Maschere, a term of uncertain origin but present in Piedmontese folklore, have been associated with the concept of witchcraft and the paranormal. They are believed to possess supernatural powers, passed down from generation to generation, inherited from mother to daughter or grandmother to granddaughter. Their abilities included bilocation and the ability to transform into animals, plants, or objects. According to tradition, the Maschere could separate their soul from their body and travel in space in an immaterial form during their magical flights. This activity took place mainly at night, while their bodies remained unattended and inanimate. They are said to have been able to heal disease and wounds, both in humans and animals, and save lives in danger. However, their capricious and vengeful nature also made them crafty and mischievous. They are described as seemingly normal women, but endowed with supernatural powers. They have the ability to pass on their powers to another living creature when they decide to end their existence. This can be a young member of the family, an animal, or even a plant. Piedmontese legends link the Maschere to the concept of immortality, even though they are vulnerable to disease and aging. It is also said that they had the ability to change into cats, which could explain the ancestral fear of felines of the Piedmontese populations. Some stories also tell of their transformation into sheep, following unsuspecting travellers before disappearing into thin air. Many local legends attribute to the Maschere the ability to control the climate, dominating the natural elements and unleashing storms, hailstorms, mists, or prolonged droughts. These supernatural powers made them powerful and respected beings. Throughout history, many women accused of being Maschere have been persecuted, tried, and sometimes condemned to be burned at the stake by the Court of Inquisition. This dark aspect of the Maschere's history testifies to the fear and persecution they have overcome over the centuries. The Musinè have left an indelible mark on Piedmontese culture and local mythology. Their connection to magic, potions, herbs and love spells make them fascinating figures who still captivate and intrigue the collective imagination. The stories handed down from generation to generation tell of secret gatherings of the Musinè on the slopes of Mount Musinè, where they met to celebrate mysterious rites and to establish ties with the supernatural. These nocturnal gatherings, described as wild dances and magical rituals, were considered moments of great power and connection with the spirit world. Despite the fear and mistrust that the Musinè inspired, some of them were said to have been able to use their powers for good. There are tales of witches who, with great skill and intuition, were able to predict the future and offer valuable advice to the community. Their fame spread rapidly, and many people turned to them for help and protection. Mount Musinè, with its majesty and pristine beauty, became the ideal place for the Musinè to practice their art and to seek refuge from persecution. The dense woods and remote caves of the mountain provided them with a safe place to meet, share knowledge, and preserve ancient traditions. There are many legends that linger around the mountain. It is not uncommon that at night, along the slopes of the Musinè, there are sudden flashes of light. Some say that it is simple lightning, ball lightning, or will-o'-the-wisps, while UFO enthusiasts have attributed the lights to extraterrestrial spaceships that would have even set up a secret base inside the mountain. The elders also speak of an enchanted cave, around which werewolves would roam, ghosts would vanish into smoke, screaming like damned souls, magic fires would burn, and there would even be buried treasure. Often these legends are the results of ancient beliefs, and there is no doubt that today some of them may seem no more than simple fairy tales for children which are still handed down by the inhabitants of the valley. For example, according to an ancient tradition, still today an enchanted cave on Mount Musinè is constantly watched over by a golden dragon. As we have recounted, in folklore the young Gualtiero would have managed to penetrate this cave, which was inhabited by a sorcerer. The latter, having been discovered by the young human, would have then fled on a chariot of fire, returning to his refuge from time to time to perform spells or magic so as not to lose his skills. The inhabitants of the nearby localities identify the spaceship Ante Litteram with the globes of fire that appear from time to time in the skies around the Musinè. But the dragon and the fire chariot are motifs present not only in legends and old fairy tales, but also in the culture of other civilizations. In Chinese mythology, for example, one often encounters stories of dragons, beings that have by now become predominant symbols in the folklore and culture of this people. In some Asian, American and African civilizations, it is the winged serpent that takes the place of the dragon, always symbolizing infinity and obviously flight. Many times this creature is accompanied by effigies of the sun. This can also be seen on the Musinè, where, in an ancient engraving, a dragon is represented next to a sun and under a series of small sculptures that seem to be a star cluster. Furthermore, a short distance from the mountain, near the small town of Capri in the Susa Valley, a blade of stone overlooks a 150-meter overhang, dominated by solar signs. The rock would look exactly like a roughly carved snake. As well as all this, people have also noticed greenish phosphorescent fires that have greatly ignited the imagination of many. In short, this mountain keeps many secrets, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Chronologically, we could talk about the two most famous ancient legends concerning the Musinè. They have nothing to do with mysterious creatures or visitors from outer space, but rather with two mythical figures of the ancient age, namely King Herod and Emperor Constantine. As written in the Gospel according to Matthew, the mountain was the seat of temporary exile of the famous king of Judea, Herod the Great, who went there around 3 AD, in expiation for the massacre of the innocents, an episode in which Herod ordered a massacre of children in order to kill Jesus, of whose birth in Bethlehem he had been informed by the Magi. However, there is no certainty about the duration of this exile. Some say, in fact, that it was only temporary, and that Herod later returned to Jericho, while others argue that his sentence was eternal, and that the king, locked up in a chariot of fire, still flies over the mountain today. Other legends state that it was here that the flaming cross with the inscription "In hoc signo vinces," or "In this sign you will win," appeared to Constantine I in 312 AD, on the eve of the so-called Battle of Turin between the army of Constantine and that of Maxentius, in the context of the civil war following the death of Constantius Chlorus. An episode that would have convinced Constantine to embrace Christianity and later to convert the entire empire, changing the fate of the history of human civilization forever. This is certainly the most famous legend concerning the Musinè, as it is full of details. September 312 AD, near Susa, the Battle of Turin approaches, which sees Flavius Valerius Aurelius Constantine, the future Constantine I, clash with Maxentius, his rival for the title of Roman Emperor and son of Maximilian Herculeus, the Roman commander responsible for the extermination of the soldiers of the Theban legion, killed because they refused to persecute Christians in Gaul. It is an encounter that seems to be guided by fate, as both leaders will be remembered in the history of Christianity for opposite reasons. Maxentius as the son of a cruel murderer of Christian soldiers, and Constantine as the emperor who will bring Christianity to Rome. However, it was in those days in the Susa Valley that an episode took place, which is attributed by historians as the Battle of the Milvian Bridge on the 28th of October 312 AD near Rome. It is said that Constantine saw a six-armed cross appear in the sky within a shining sun, the Chi-Rho, and ordered it to be painted on the shields of his soldiers. However, according to the Piedmontese, the famous vision took place on the slopes of Mount Musinè in the Susa Valley, where the clash between the two leaders was being prepared. Constantine, coming from Britain and after crossing the Monginevro Pass, called Summus Alpes, reached Segusia, the current-day Susa. He commanded a large army made up of Roman soldiers, but also barbarians captured in war, including Germans, Celts and Britons, for a total of about 90,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. He camped at the mouth of the Doronea Valley, preparing to attack Susa, occupied by Maxentius's troops. According to legend, the day before the final battle, shortly after noon, Constantine was praying to the gods, when he saw in the sky an intersection of lights above the sun and a flaming inscription, "In hoc signo vinces." This prodigious event convinced Constantine to have his men fight the next day, wearing the symbol that had appeared on their military insignia and shields, a cross in the sun, the aforementioned Chi-Rho. Victory in the battle manifested itself clearly, and Susa was conquered. However, once the soldiers invaded the city, fires and looting ensued, but in an act of wisdom, Constantine ordered that the looting be suspended and the fires extinguished, in order to avoid the hatred of the surrounding populations, an intuition that greatly benefited his public image in front of the citizens of the valley. Subsequently, the future emperor, certain of his actions, headed towards Augusta Taurinorum, now Turin, where Maxentius's army was encamped. Travelling along the ancient Via Cozia, he lined up his troops near a hill to have a better view of the movements of the enemy troops. The battle was won thanks to the strategic skill of the leader. Maxentius's men were decimated, and finally Constantine made his triumphal entry into the city of Turin, acclaimed by its inhabitants. Furthermore, as soon as the news of the victory arrived, many Po Valley cities sent representatives to congratulate the victor and praise the Vittoria Augusta, recognizing both the military power of Constantine and his wisdom in dealing with the civilian populations. Constantine's triumphal march did not stop in Rome, but continued as far as the Bosphorus, where he built a new capital, Constantinople, an ancient metropolis located between two continents and destined to become the crossroads of two worlds, the East and the West. Thanks to the enormous fortune given to Constantine, a still widespread belief was born regarding the existence of a mysterious positive energy emanating from Mount Musinè, which is believed to have beneficial effects on people's health and well-being. According to this popular belief, visiting the mountain or spending time near it can promote the regeneration of body and mind, increase vitality, and promote general well-being. All of this over the centuries has attracted many people looking for a healing energy or a spiritual experience. In practice, Mount Musinè can be considered an inexhaustible reserve of energy, a sort of catalyzing nucleus capable of feeding the entire Susa Valley. A sub-peak of the Musinè is Mount Piciriano, where the Abbey of St. Michael stands, in perfect harmony with the famous Norman Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel, a famous rocky islet that emerges from the English Channel in front of the Normandy coast. It is also interesting to note that the predominant colour associated with the Archangel Michael, according to esoteric experts, is blue-golden, which appears to coincide with the line of energy extending between the two abbeys. Another legend linked to Mount Musinè concerns the presence of mystical forces or spirits that dwell on the mountain. According to some stories, the mountain represents a meeting place between the real and the spiritual world, a portal between two worlds that very rarely meet, except in specific places where the veils between the two dimensions would seem to thin, producing a direct communication between the beings and phenomena that inhabit them. Ancient spirits are said to manifest in different forms, such as mysterious lights or unusual sounds, and communicate with those who are open to such experiences. This myth has attracted the curiosity of people interested in occultism and spiritual practices. One of these was Matilde dell'Oro Hermil, a writer originally from the Susa Valley who in 1893 wrote a book entitled Roc Maul and Montpantero, Its Legends and Its Inhabitants. This text, a mix of esotericism and theories that are nothing short of imaginative, tries to explain the archaic and antediluvian origins of the peoples who inhabit the Susa Valley. A chapter of the book tells of the fate of Rama, an ancient legendary city that hasn't yet been discovered by historians and archaeologists. Matilde dell'Oro Hermil writes about the city thus: "Only a few houses remain of Rama, or rather only a few houses in one of the key points of the prehistoric city. Of it is said, with melancholic pride, that its arcades covered the whole width of the valley. Rama was a large city of the time. Its walls surrounded it for about 8 kilometers, and it was consecrated under the sign of Aries. It opposed the city of Taurus, which resided as it does today over there, in the midst of the Po. Rama was a peaceful location where intellectuals resided, while nearby Mount Rocciamelone was the summer location where the inhabitants took refuge to escape the great heat. But the mountain was also a defensive stronghold, with its deposit, its strong treasure chest, and its lookout with infernal machines to keep the importunates away. These weapons were brought here in an even more ancient age by King Romulus, who, once he had conquered the mountain and driven out the invaders, would have collected and hidden a great treasure in the mountain and would have defended it with a frightening device similar to a catapult. This weapon was capable of unleashing adverse atmospheric phenomena against those who tried to climb the summit. Anyone who tried to approach it was repulsed by a sudden thick fog and a hailstorm and a rain of arrows accompanied by a frightening roar. Unfortunately, Matilde dell'Oro Hermil does not dwell too much in describing the mysterious city, nor in narrating the cause of its disappearance, generically referring to a flood. In addition to the writer's words, considered by most to be mere literary fantasy, unfortunately the only other element in which reference is made to the great city of Rama seems to be a map from the late 18th century, in which the words "ruins of Rama" can be read, near the town of Chianocco, and Rivo di Rama, indicated as a tributary of the Dora Riparia river. Matilde dell'Orgo Hermil herself was inspired by this map for her book, as she writes, "In an ancient geographical map I see this name on the bank of the Duranza, perhaps a mistake, an incorrectness of the geographer who does not know at what point to place a vague terminology that is understood and no longer exists." Although the evidence for Rama's existence is weak and is credited by various voices in the fields of historiography and archaeology, the map and Hermil's work have made possible a link in the collective imagination between the city of Rama and the myth of Phaethon. Phaethon boasted of being the son of the sun god Helios, but his friends made fun of him because they didn't believe him. Encouraged by his mother, the nymph Clymene, one day he presents himself to the sun god and asks him if he really is his father. Helios confirms his paternity and grants Phaethon a wish. Phaethon asks him if he can drive the sun chariot for a day so as to demonstrate his true origins to everyone. His father tries to dissuade him, illustrating the dangerous difficulties he would face, but in the end he is forced to consent to his son's wish, and the young man climbs aboard his father's solar chariot. His father implores him not to go too high or too low, but Phaethon is too excited and anxious to complete his ride on the sun chariot and listens distractedly to his advice. The horses, who realize the different weight of the new guide, rush off in a hasty and disorderly charge. Phaethon is terrified. In the mad charge, cities, mountains and regions, even those usually covered in frost and ice, are overwhelmed and burnt to a crisp. Libya becomes a desert. Historic rivers evaporate or disappear, as happens at the sources of the Nile. Finally, Zeus, to save the universe from ruin, strikes the chariot with a thunderbolt. The young man falls to earth, directly into the waters of the river Eridano, the current-day River Po, and drowns. The Eliade, daughters of the sun and Phaethon's sisters, begin to cry inconsolably by the river. Zeus takes pity on them and transforms them into poplar trees, which can still be seen today along the River Po. Matilde dell'Orgo Hermil, and subsequently many of her followers, hypothesized that the crash site of the solar chariot was the Susa Valley. But one detail drastically changes the ending of the myth. In fact, for them, Phaethon would have survived the crash and would have gathered some disciples, educating them in the cult of the sun and giving them the gift of divine knowledge. All this knowledge would have been inscribed on a gigantic golden wheel, which, even today, would be kept secretly in the bowels of the Alps, in a mysterious cave whose access is unknown to most. Later, some ancient astronaut theorists associated the tragic crash of Phaethon's golden chariot with a possible UFO crash. For them, the son of Helios would no longer represent a semi-god of Greek mythology, but would be the representative of an alien civilization that gave men advanced technical knowledge and built the lost city of Rama. And Mount Musinè is precisely the epicenter of extraterrestrial activity in the region. So much so that in the 1970s there were those who hypothesized that the mountain was actually hollow and that it housed a secret base for UFOs. Returning to the legend that would bind Phaethon to the Susa Valley, it is said that after his return to heaven, Phaethon left behind one of his golden assistants to help those who had learned his teachings. It was a creature of golden metal, capable of changing shape at will. It is believed that this creature hides inside a large cave located on Mount Musinè, where it appears as a mighty golden dragon, protector of a precious green gem with immense powers. For esotericists, it would represent the Holy Grail, while for the theorists of ancient astronauts, it would represent a sort of reactor capable of producing unlimited energy, or a sort of weapon of mass destruction. Rumours have always circulated of werewolves, of ghostly images that wander in the semi-darkness, of strange animals that find refuge in unknown caves within the rocky soul of the mountain. And it is for this reason that a legend speaks of a cursed cave in which, every May the 1st, witches, wizards and werewolves would meet to praise the forces of evil during a Sabbath. A legend that has distant roots in time, since, according to some writings from the 1600s and 1800s, the valley was often covered by demonic music, accompanied by anguished screams full of pain. Furthermore, the sight would amplify, when one stops there, the extrasensory faculties that each of us possess deep inside, but which are evident only in particular circumstances. In short, this area would be, as we have already seen, a catalyst of energy, but also a place that would allow our dormant senses to awaken and communicate with a dimension other than our own. Dowsers have declared that near the mountain, rods and pendulums would move in a much more accentuated way than normal. The area has always been the scene of apparitions of mysterious blue, greenish and fluorescent glows in the night. They made their appearance as far back as 966 AD. At the time, Bishop Amicone was in the Susa Valley to consecrate the church of St. Michael on Mount Pirchiriano, opposite the Musinè. During the night, while awaiting the arrival of the High Prelate, the villagers witnessed a fascinating but at the same time frightening spectacle. The sky was crossed by trails and globes of fire, which illuminated the church as if a fire had broken out. Other stories speak of chariots of fire, often flying over the peak. Nowadays, there are frequent night and day sightings of unidentified flying objects. Furthermore, at the foot of the Musinè, there is a shadow cone that is an interference zone that obscures any radio transmissions. Even the radio transmissions of private planes that fly over the area are disturbed, but these problems cease the moment the plane moves away from the mountain. In Torre della Vigna, on the western slope of Mount Musinè, there are a series of cup-shaped structures called cupels. These are arranged in such a way as to form celestial maps. The Northern Cross, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Cassiopeia and the Pleiades are all represented. In practice, there is the whole Northern Hemisphere, but also other representations not yet identified. The view of the valley is suggestive when, once the cupels have been filled with fuel and set on fire, the mountain is covered with many flickering lights. Finally, the distribution of vegetation on Mount Musinè appears strange, particularly rich at the foot of the mountain, but which then thins out almost suddenly as the altitude increases. Forest rangers have pointlessly spent large sums of money to reforest the area, in which the newly planted young trees seem to die one after the other. Popular belief explains this mystery with the continuous procession of damned souls who eternally go up and down the mountain, while according to a slightly more modern belief, it would be the radioactive emanations of a secret base that produce this sterility. It goes without saying that there are countless testimonies of sightings of unidentified flying objects, both nocturnal and diurnal. Numerous witnesses also recall the apparitions on top of flaming spherical globes. And often, almost on a weekly basis, there are tales of strange lights sighted in the sky, attributed by ufologists to alien visitors. This has led to the belief that the mountain is a destination for extraterrestrials, and that various samples of scorched earth testify to the passage of spaceships sighted by some local farmers. Mount Musinè and Turin include in their chronicles many stories or anecdotes concerning visitors from outer space. Over time, sightings in the area have been witnessed by people from the most differing social classes, and they do not differ much from the descriptions that have now become commonplace in the world of ufology. In general, descriptions of night lights or anomalous flashes, various types of disc-shaped or cigar-shaped flying objects, and phantomatic landings of spaceships with descriptions of their probable occupants have been reported. There are many cases of sightings that have occurred in the Turin area and around the Musinè since the 1960s and 1970s. Such as the sighting of the 18th of July 1967, where a luminous globe was sighted in Turin, or the one that occurred in February 1971, where about 1,000 people in all of northern Italy would have observed formations of lights in the sky moving towards the west. In the province of Turin, the epicenter of these sightings is certainly Mount Musinè. In fact, it is said that in the bowels of the mountain there is an underground base that houses mysterious cosmic aircraft and their occupants, as is also reported by the words of the Piedmontese contactee Germana Grosso. Germana Grosso was a simple housewife who over the years achieved great popularity among ufology enthusiasts thanks to the alleged telepathic messages that she would have received from superior and extraplanetary entities. Germana was born in Turin in 1923 and led a quiet and reserved life until 1957, when, after a psychophysical breakdown, she began to telepathically receive messages at any time of the day or night. These had the particularity of being perceived by her mind as a sort of click. This represented the moment in which the woman would grab her typewriter and patiently transcribe everything that was transmitted to her. These communications touched on all sorts of topics, spiritual, political, and religious. She herself tells of her experience. The faculty that was given to me is telepathy. With this, I entered into connection, or contact if you prefer, with inhabitants of other worlds. It's just wonderful to be able to telepathically receive messages from them. I have been receiving messages and painting for years and years, always telepathically, and I have realized in all this time that I am simply a means for these beings to spread the truth of their existence. Like me, there are many other people who receive telepathically, and still others who meet them personally. In the beginning, my telepathy was still undeveloped, and therefore I had to treat the experience as a gradual mental and spiritual school. Then, little by little, continuing to receive from them almost every day, I entered a different mental state. My horizons have widened. I have understood how big the cosmic universe is, with all its infinite inhabited worlds. In fact, they have the ability to capture from people's minds what they have in mind they want to do. However, they clarified to me that the events communicated may not even happen, because people can change their thinking for some reason, and this is why they never give precise dates to events. They possess very sensitive devices which pick up the negative waves for terrestrial upheavals in any sector, from climate change to earthquakes and other natural catastrophes, or those caused by humans. I receive messages that I transcribe faithfully, word by word, never adding anything of my own. I've never forced anyone to believe me. However, many things, if not all, have regularly come true. Now that my telepathy has become more selective, I can communicate with them in a receiving and transmitting way. These beings are very dear and nice, and above all they have feelings of infinite love and wonderful brotherhood towards us earthlings. Now that this faculty of mine is becoming more and more refined, I manage to see what they want me to see. How and where they live, how they dress, how their means of flight are made, what their bases are like, be they on their worlds or here on Earth. When I receive informational messages, they can let me know, always with visual telepathy, the places they tell me about, and I even hear the voices of the locals. My telepathic faculty serves them for a very clear purpose: to make their existence known, as well as their way of life, their means of flight, the need to show themselves to people, and to have personal contacts. Obviously, there is no evidence to support what Germano Grosso says. However, it adds yet another layer of mystery regarding the Musinè and its surrounding territories. Again, according to Grosso's statements, these aliens would have built some underground bases near Turin, in the Musinè area in the Susa Valley, and that they can freely enter and exit through a secret cave thanks to their spaceships, capable of flying using the magnetic lines of our planet, such as the 45th parallel or the energy line of St. Michael. In the deep heart of the Turin area, a series of sinister testimonies has afflicted the region since 1808. Luminous bodies, presumed visitors from other worlds, have crossed the skies of this mysterious place. The first report took place on April the 2nd, when the inhabitants of Perosa, Argentina, in the Pinerolo area, were amazed by strange luminous spheres that moved at impossible speeds. But real terror struck Torre Pellice on April the 18th of that year. Mr. Sismondi, secretary to the Justice of Peace at the time, was awakened by an ominous buzzing that carried through the air, without any signs of it stopping. As he leaned out of the window, he witnessed an event that would mark his life forever. A shiny disc hovered above the lawn in front of his house, and then quickly disappeared into the sky. The years passed, and in 1932 a new stage was marked in the history of the inexplicable. A disc which changed colour in a disturbing way danced through the streets of Turin and the surrounding hills, heading towards Pino Torinese. These may be the earliest surviving reports of daytime disc sightings. But since the 1950s, the sightings have taken on increasingly large proportions and have occurred in very specific periods. Scholars of these phenomena, ufologists, have even coined a term to describe such periods of intense activity: ufological waves. The Turin area witnessed spectacular waves of sightings in 1950, 1954 and 1973, only to then dwindle in their appearance in the 1990s. But still today, even if with less visual impact, there is at least one sighting a month in the whole Piedmont region. For the 1973 wave, we find a number of interesting newspaper articles for the sightings in the Turin area. In the Stampa and Stampa Sera newspapers of the period from the 1st to the 5th of December 1973, we can read headlines and articles of this tenor. A flying object in the sky over Caselle. The story of the Turin pilot who chased the flying saucer. He gave chase with his Piper up to Voghera. Then the UFO disappeared with a vertical surge. His words are confirmed by the commander of the military airport. Another flying saucer spotted last night in Turin? It would seem so. There is the testimony of 3 people in this regard. A teacher, Mrs. Dina Calosso, 32, says, "I live in an attic in Via Tiziano 4. At 7:30 p.m. from my terrace, I see a luminous object slowly cross the sky and head towards the Susa Valley." A college student tells of his sensational adventure. He photographed the flying saucer in the mountains of the Susa Valley. The object was motionless in the sky, then disappeared, spinning at breakneck speed towards Bardonecchia. Absolute military secrecy on the Caselle sighting. Fighters were also alerted to intercept the mysterious UFO. The pilots say, "We have never seen such a thing." Last night, a disc above Turin reappeared. Collective psychosis or sensational reality, sighted again above Caselle. The UFO photographed was not the only one. At 3 o'clock last night, the flying saucer was still in the sky over Caselle. It was noticed by civilian and military personnel at the airport. It stopped for about 10 minutes, and many were able to observe the impossible evolutions of the luminous globe. Again tonight in Caselle, the usual mysterious object. Countless sources coming and going. A NATO officer arrived yesterday in Turin from the Naples command to investigate the UFOs sighted in recent days. The testimonies of those who saw it. It was a very fast, luminous globe. Piedmont, flying saucers. They have been appearing frequently in the sky for a few days. They have been seen at Caselle, observed on radar screens, followed in vain by planes. Eyewitness statements. Strange celestial object photographed by an amateur in Rivalta. Flying saucers sighted in Piedmont. UFOs at the limit of the believable. The testimonies of those who have seen the globes that vibrate and emit iridescent beams overlap. In the Piedmontese capital, there are hundreds of apparitions. All descriptions match. Are they satellites, balloons, extraterrestrial spaceships, or, more simply, ball lightning? The mysterious apparitions seen and photographed in the Susa Valley. Witnesses say a sphere of red, white and blue light pulsated like a heart. A woman heard a strange noise. It sounded like a lost plane trying to land. She opened a window, an arcane vision. But there are still those who work with their imagination. A footprint 40 centimeters long with 10 toes. UFO hunting in the sky. Military aviation planes intervened last night. Susa, December the 5th. It seems like the beginning of a war between two worlds in a science fiction film. Two planes emerge at the last light of sunset behind Mont Chabaton, proceeding at a reduced speed in a reconnaissance flight. Suddenly, one of the two breaks away from the other, surges upwards, then performs a half loop and dives down towards the woods. What did the pilots see? From the slopes of Roccia Melone, we watch the scene with binoculars. A sudden reddish glow, a very intense light. A moment later, high up, a streak of fire lights up, like the jet of a rocket, and a very bright white point, perfectly circular, more like a small satellite than a flying disc, at a very high altitude, in the opposite direction to that from which the fighters appeared, disappears on the horizon, behind the mountains. 5 years later, in 1978, an incredible episode took place on Mount Musinè involving UFOs and aliens as protagonists. It was December the 8th when two hikers were exploring the mountain. Suddenly, they saw nearby a floating dark sphere about 2 meters in diameter with an intense white light within it. Then they were overwhelmed by a blinding light that enveloped them completely. One of the youngsters, attracted by the beam of light, decided to follow it, but in that moment he disappeared into thin air, as did the two-tone sphere itself. Shocked and frightened, his companion ran down to the base of the path and contacted other hikers, who set out in search of his missing friend. A group of 14 people patrolled the area where the disappearance occurred and retraced their paths several times without seeing anything strange. At 4 in the morning, the umpteenth search, right along the path previously searched dozens of times, led to the discovery of the missing boy, who was sitting on a boulder. However, he was visibly in a state of shock, with a severe burn on his leg and a rapid heartbeat. When asked about his experiences, he recounted seeing strange creatures descending from what appeared to be a spaceship. These beings, with a single touch, paralyzed him for a period of time, trying to communicate with him without success. Finally, they had let him go. He described his captors as deformed humans with broad torsos and thin legs. They were more than 2 meters tall, with a disproportionate head and a protruding face like that of rodents. They had large, perfectly round eyes and canines protruding from their mouths like those of wolves. Following the incident, both hikers suffered severe conjunctivitis from the blinding light that dazzled them. The story caused a sensation, so much so that it was reported in various newspapers of the time. But the extraordinary events did not stop there. In 1996, two other hikers descending from Mount Musinè spotted a flying object with a yellow-green cylindrical shape. It had rounded and transparent ends that allowed them to glimpse two beings, similar to men, sitting inside it. This second sighting further fueled the mystery surrounding Mount Musinè. In the new millennium, the first case of a close encounter with an unidentified flying object occurred in 2002. It was the night between the 28th and the 29th of September at the Freight village located in the small municipality of Orbassano. The protagonist of the story is Paolo, a night watchman in charge of monitoring the area. In the days to come, he would tell reporters of a disconcerting experience that took place that night in early autumn. From his post, he saw all images suddenly disappear from the monitors in a sudden blackout. Then, in an even more disturbing event, the electric gate opened by itself. All this brought Paolo out of his cabin. As soon as he took a few steps in front of the entrance to the freight village, he heard a hiss behind him, followed by a dazzling light coming from above. Above him was a circular object, bright and of considerable size, revolving above a street lamp. He watched it for only a few moments before it suddenly shot away with incredible speed. The last striking case of a close encounter took place in 2005, and here the description would seem very similar to that of the two hikers in 1978. The close encounter took place in Scalenghe, less than 30 kilometers away from Mount Musinè. On June the 29th, 2005, a farmer in the area got up around 4 in the morning to go and check that water was reaching the irrigation channel of one of his fields. Around 4:30, he was cycling along an isolated country road. Being summer, the light was enough to see in the distance. Even though it was still night, the sky was clear and dawn would arrive shortly thereafter. Alongside his large cornfield, he stopped from time to time to check the various valves that directed the water to the agricultural lands. At one point, in an adjacent recently reaped field, he saw a dark figure kneeling on the ground, and believing it was another local farmer, he stopped and called out to him to say hello. At his call, the figure became aware of him and stood up to look at him. The farmer stopped under a lamppost and in turn stared at him, trying to figure out if he really was an acquaintance of his, but he soon realized that his features were totally different from what he expected. The being that stared at him, while resembling a human, had much wider shoulders and was about 2 meters tall. In the dark, his head looked decidedly larger than normal, like a watermelon. The farmer was dumbfounded, and the figure advanced towards him slowly, moving on 2 very thin legs compared to the rest of his body. When he reached a close enough distance, the farmer managed to glimpse his face, or rather his snout, which looked like that of a huge mouse. His eyes were large, black, shiny and round, and his ears were long and pointed. The creature was dark grey in colour, although the farmer, in his testimony, said he didn't understand if it was fur or tight overalls. Behind the being appeared a blackish sphere, about 2 meters wide, which floated a few centimeters from the ground, and a very intense round light emanated from its centre, like that of a flashlight. The creature continued to advance in the direction of the farmer, who, overcome by fear, began to pedal with all the strength he had in his legs to ride away. As he fled, he glanced over his shoulder several times, but the humanoid and the orb had vanished into the darkness. In the excitement of the escape, the man couldn't understand if the being had gone on foot or if he had entered the sphere and taken off. He quickly returned home and, visibly shaken, told what he had seen to family members, who decided to go out to verify his story. None of them noticed anything strange in the field that the farmer pointed to, but the next day burns were found on the ground which formed a circle about 1.5 meters wide, and in the following days other farmers in the area also said they had seen strange lights in their fields. Close encounters of the third kind, UFO sightings and an underground alien base are part of the countless stories and episodes that make the Musinè, and even more so the Susa Valley, a hotspot for lovers of ufology. But perhaps the most unique and fascinating story of all is that of Abzu Ismaili Swandi, the man who came from the stars. We have to go back in time again, exactly 5 years before the close encounter of the two hikers. It is 1973 and a mysterious UFO association appears in Piedmont, the Sidereal Intercontact Center, or SIC. Through some typed circulars, the group announces the arrival on Earth of Abzu Ismaili Swandi, a 256-year-old alien who resides on a flying saucer. The message delivered by the association reads as follows: "Get ready for the big moment. We want to come in peace, to get to know you in peace. If this cannot happen, it will only be due to the blindness of men, and ruin, crisis, dismay and destruction will result. The inhabitants of outer space can, albeit with pain, witness the disintegration of planet Earth, but they cannot participate in a suicide that would involve the entire galaxy. I bless all in peace and cosmic brotherhood." According to the letters sent by the SIC, Abzu Ismaili Swandi would have descended to Earth for only a few days and would have returned to his native planet on November the 30th at around 6:05 p.m. The celestial being would have held periodic conferences on the destiny of humanity in San Giusto Canavese, a town in the province of Turin. His features are documented in a photograph that ends up in all the newspapers as those of an old man with unkempt hair and beard, tall and dressed in an elegant black velvet suit. The news aroused reactions from the local newspapers, divided between those who were curious about this new, presumed holy man and those who wasted no time in mocking the figure of Abzu Ismaili Swandi. The story took an unusual turn in the final days of November 1973, when a circular from the SIC announced a grandiose demonstration on the Musinè, near Turin. At 6:05 p.m. on Friday the 30th of November, the date of Abzu's departure, an unidentified luminous object was detected by the control tower of Caselle Airport, and from that moment a real UFO hunt was born in the city of Turin and in the surrounding areas. It had its climax on the night of December the 4th, when an alleged unidentified flying object made its appearance in the Piedmontese skies. It was also spotted by the pilot Giovanni Mezzellani in service on a DC-9 of the airline Alitalia. The journalist of La Stampa newspaper, Mario Barriona, later spoke of the sighting in one of his articles, stating that on the same night of December the 4th, Air Force fighters took off to intercept it. Many people, hundreds, would have noticed the object as it headed from Caselle towards the Musinè. The fighters spotted the UFO but were unable to intercept it. In the Susa Valley, there is a meeting point for mysterious objects. Everyone agrees it looks like the living room of a UFO club. There are those, among the best prepared in ufology, who argue that the phenomenon is due to the fact that the Musinè is a radioactive mountain and can serve as a reference point to mysterious objects. Following the wave of sightings, the press organizations of Turin organized a conference on ufology for December the 14th, but 3 days before the conference, various local newspapers received a circular from the SIC admonishing the institutions. That which is not serious and false prophets will be eliminated with fire. The Musinè will burn. This was the content of the message, which, however, did not arouse much concern in the offices of the province of Turin. But, punctually, in the early afternoon of the 14th, a series of fires devastate the woods on the slope of the Musinè. After a race against time by the forest rangers and the firefighters, the fire was put out, and immediately they had the certainty that the cause of what had happened was arson. After the fire, the SIC disappeared into thin air. No more messages were received from them, and no one was arrested for the fires. Finally, some played the events down, believing that behind the sidereal intercontact center there was nothing more than a Goliardic operation working against the ufologists of the time. Probably the only legacy of Absu Ismaili Swandi and the SIC could be a singular plaque placed on the summit of the mountain between 1973 and 1978. It would have a spiritual maxim engraved upon it, which reads as follows: "Here is the one antenna of the 7 electrodynamic points, which from its own incandescent live nucleus the whole earth breathes and emits life. Here the astral entities that were Hatshepsut, Eknaton, Jesus the Christ, Abraham, Confucius, Mohammed, Buddha, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Francis of Assisi, and even you, if you want to, operate to constructive brotherhood among all peoples. Think about it intensely. 3 minutes. Thought is construction." A mysterious and enigmatic message for a new world, where everyone should feel like brothers, children of a single celestial matrix, and collaborate, united, in the construction of a better humanity, forgetting wars, fratricidal vendettas, jealousies and hate, and moving together towards a natural cosmic evolution that will favor universal peace forever. Very beautiful and constructive words and warnings, but undoubtedly utopian for our society. And so it is with this message of universal brotherhood that our investigation into the myths and legends of Mount Musinè comes to an end. Throughout our documentary, we immersed ourselves in the mystery shrouded around Mount Musinè, a majestic mountain located in the Piedmont region. We explored age-old legends, stories of supernatural creatures, and the lure of ancient hidden treasure. But there is another aspect that has captured the imagination of people all around the world: the alleged UFO activity on the Musinè. Mount Musinè has gained international fame as one of the hotspots for the sighting of UFOs and unexplained events. Numerous reports testify to sightings of strange lights in the sky, unidentified flying objects, and apparently paranormal phenomena. These sightings have fueled the curiosity and interest of UFO enthusiasts, researchers, and conspiracy theorists, making this area at the foot of the Alps one of the most fascinating mystery sites in the world. Nighttime stargazing expeditions have become a recurring activity, with groups of people congregating on the mountain in hopes of spotting something extraordinary. This interest has also led to the formation of associations and groups that seek to study and understand the UFO phenomenon on Mount Musinè. However, we must be very careful in drawing definitive conclusions from these accounts. Research into UFO sightings requires a thorough analysis based on reliable evidence and testimony. While some of the sightings on Mount Musinè can be rationally explained, there are still many cases that remain unexplained, but it is always important to maintain scientific skepticism and an open mind while exploring the UFO phenomenon. Sightings can be influenced by a variety of factors, including natural phenomena, conventional aviation, atmospheric phenomena, and even our own mental state. Only through rigorous analysis and a scientific approach can we hope to gain a clearer understanding of these events. Mount Musinè has become a place of connection between UFO enthusiasts, scholars, and those who are simply fascinated by mystery. Regardless of the truth or nature of the sightings, Mount Musinè continues to fascinate and attract people from all over the world. Its natural beauty and cultural heritage blend with the mystery of the unknown, creating a unique and fascinating atmosphere. As our documentary nears its conclusion, we continue to wonder about the legends and stories that play out in this mountain and their true nature. Whether they are true events or simple manifestations of our imagination, the important thing is that these stories continue to stimulate our curiosity and make us reflect on the wonders and mysteries hidden in the world around us.